So, Syria. This is a heavy topic, and I think to fully understand all the implications, or at least as best as I can explain them to you, I need to split these videos up a little. So I'm definitely going to do a one and then a second part. The first part is going to be the history of the country, and then the second part is going to be the current debacle that we're in, the quagmire that is the Obama/Donald Trump administration's connections with Syria and everything following the Arab Spring. So first, give you a little bit of history. Syria used to be known, when it was originally joined as a country, the Syrian Arab Republic. And it included several different groups of people: Arabs, Greeks, Armenians, Assyrians, Kurds, and Turks. Then there are all of the religious groups, which you have Sunnis and Christians, Shiites, Alawites, Druze, Baathists, Salafists, those are generally from Saudi Arabia, and Yazidis. The Sunnis are the majority of the country, and you can even see that to this day. Alawites are a faction of the Sunnis, and the Alawites are the ones that are in power right now. 1945, Syrian got their first parliamentary system. They got it from the French, which is really interesting because that's kind of where we got our Constitution from, the Magna Carta, and that was a French document. So at least the French did a couple things right. And for the first few years, Syria was doing okay, but then in 49, there started several coups. Now, how it all happened is up for debate. There are a lot of different sects. There are a lot of different religious groups involved. But the CIA was involved in setting up a lot of this destabilization for this country. There's a lot of oil to be had. It's the same story of just about every other Middle Eastern country. The only reason why we really care is we have a vested interest in that oil wealth that's underneath their desert. Been doing it for years. We'll probably do it for a few years more until we just completely get rid of fossil fuels, but I digress. So there was several military coups from 49 until 1970. I will go through a couple of those just to give you a brief history. 1958, they had a brief union with Egypt, and then there was a Syrian coup in 1961 where they wanted to start their first constitutional referendum. And they had a vote across the country with 97% of the vote. You know it's got to be a little bit corrupt if it's 97%. I don't know about you, but I'm lucky if 50% of the people in my life like me. 97%. Okay, so they got their constitutional referendum, probably a little shady, but it was very unstable. And it only took 2 years before the Ba'athist Party, and they were a military group, they had a military coup, and they suspended the Constitution, and that Ba'athist Party has basically ruled up until 2011 with different people taking over, but it's all part of that Ba'athist Sunni sect. And just a side note, Saddam Hussein was a Ba'athist as well. So Syria and Iraq had similar leadership. They didn't always get along, but they respected each other not to fight each other so much. But that's another story. Basically, right now, we're just concentrating on Syria. So, 1963, the Baathists had their coup, and they suspended the Constitution. One of those Ba'athist leaders was Hafiz al-Assad. That is the current leader's, Bashar al-Assad's father. And he has been working his way up the ranks in the Syrian military since 1961. And after the 1963 coup, he became the commander of the Syrian Air Force. So he got himself a nice big promotion. He also participated in the second coup, where now the Baathists are being kicked out of power, and the new leader, Salah Jadid, he takes over with Assad right up underneath of him, and he gets yet another promotion. Now he's the defense minister, so his star is rising. Things are looking good for Hafez al-Assad. It didn't take but another 4 years before he got kind of tired of Jadid, and he usurped him, and in 1970, he basically declared himself leader supreme of Syria. He de-radicalized the Ba'athist Party. The Baathists at that time Syria was still being run like a theocracy, meaning that politics and religion were intermingled, where, we have a separation of church and state. They do not. That is a theocracy where everything is being led by its religion, and that interprets all of the politics. So he de-radicalized the Ba'athist government, and then he strengthened his relationship with the Soviets so he could have some support from them against Israel. And you look at that map, you can tell that there's a lot of hatred going on there, because you have the Turks, you have the Syrians, you have Jordan down here, you have Yemen over here, you have Israel here, Egypt below, Iraq and Iran, all of those in one little area, and then Saudi Arabia, this huge group over here with all its military. So there's a lot of contention, and Syria is smack dab stuck in the middle with you. Anyway, just trying to keep it light. It's a heavy topic, I know. So Assad Sr., he instituted the one-man rule, meaning one man rules, and he divided the state up into two factions. His group, the Alawites, were in control of the military, the intel, and the security. And he allowed the Sunnis to take over the politics. Now, that's basically saying, hey, you guys do all the talking and the rule writing and what have you. I'll let you take care of that until we don't agree with you, because I have the military. And I have the intelligence, and I have all the disciplinary actions. So you guys can talk all you like and make all the rules you want until you find one that we don't like, and then we'll put our foot down. So the Alawites, which is Assad, they have this full control over the military, and they managed to basically do what Saddam Hussein did. A lot of crazy groups. He was just a little bit crazier, and he controlled it. He kept all of the insanity kind of corralled. It's still crazy to live there, but it was secular. All of these different religious groups were able to semi-coexist. I'm not saying there wasn't some violence. Of course there was violence, but he had a handle on it. So once Hafez al-Assad, the senior, takes over, then all of a sudden there's this kind of cult of personality. For those of you who don't really know other than the song, In Living Color song, which rocks, whenever you see the big posters on the side of the buildings with the leader in his different outfits, he's got this GQ outfit, then he's got his staunch military hat outfits, and, then he's, I don't know, this is a fun picture where he's juggling. There's pictures of him everywhere, and that's that whole cult of personality, and it was basically surrounding the entire family. So, Assad is doing okay. He's kind of handling everything, and he's ruling with an iron fist, and nobody's considering every couple years there was a coup. He's managed to maintain power up until 1983. Now, Hafez's health is in question, and they're not sure if he's going to live. So he starts looking for a successor. He wants it to stay in his family, and his first choice was his brother, Rifat. But Hafez started to get better. and he didn't want to give up his throne. He thought he was going to die, but it turns out he wasn't. But Rafat was a little pissed because he had a chance that he was actually going to, be the ruler, the president-in-chief, and Assad didn't want to give it up. So his brother tried to usurp him, and, Hafiz said, you gotta go. So he exiled him. And he managed to maintain structure in Syria for a while. Hafiz had 2 sons. His oldest name was Basil or Basil. Basil Fawlty. What is it, my little piranha fish? Sorry. Basil was the eldest son, and he had been groomed by his dad coming up through the military, because that's how you maintain power in, a government like this. You have to know everybody in the military, and Basil did. And everything was going great up until 1984, where he suddenly dies in a car accident. And Hafiz Assad is just frantic. So he's getting older, and he knows that he has got to get his heir in there. He's got another son, but he's in Europe right now. He's studying to be an ophthalmologist. And that son is Bashar. Now, Bashar, he had no military experience. He certainly didn't have any political experience, but Hafiz was really adamant about making sure he got in there. And he immediately throws him into the military. Now, of course, there was some backlash amongst the Ba'athist Party politicians, but Hafiz put the kibosh on that real fast and shut him down. Says, nope. Not going to happen. And if you have any dissenting words, you're gone. So he demoted and exiled a lot of people that did not agree with Bashar taking over. Nevertheless, it kept him quiet. And in 1998, Bashar al-Assad was put in control of the military occupation over Lebanon. This is where he gets his military experience. And, of course, they do all the modeling photos, and he's in his military fatigues, and then he looks really presidential. And, and it basically calmed down the entire country. Okay, we have somebody who is going to take over for his father, and he looks like he's got some experience. Whether or not he did is a different story, but that doesn't really matter. It's all about appearances in countries like this. So in 2000, Hafiz dies and Bashar takes power. And at first, the U.S., the EU, and the Arab groups thought he was going to be more of a moderate, because those are the things he was talking about, was bringing back some of the theocrats and keeping the religious rule a little bit more at bay and being more of a secular country. Those are the things that he talked about. But he wanted to instate a rule that you did not have to be Muslim to be in power. And at first, everybody thought that was kind of cool, but within the first year, you could tell that the things that he was doing and the violence that was going on and surrounding him, and, the strong military presence in his country, that he was not going to be a moderate. But didn't stop him from getting reelected in 2007. Syrian leaders have a 7-year term. So he was reelected in 2007 with 99% of the votes. You gotta laugh. You have to laugh at it, because obviously there's something rotten in Delaware. There's something rotten in Denmark, obviously. Or I should say, there's something rotten in Damascus. So he maintains power from 2007 up until 2011. And the country had become a little bit more polarized. There were a lot of people who wanted things to be more moderate. They wanted less military. And in March of 2011, there began a lot of protests. This is what is called the Arab Spring. And a lot of these younger people were protesting, and it was peaceful protesting. They had their placards, and they were carrying flowers. And after a couple of days of that, Assad didn't really like it. So he sends his military to kind of go out there and shut him up. And he didn't start off uber violent, but, he sent out his stormtroopers with the full body shields and the tear gas and the stormtrooper helmets and all that stuff. So the protesters became a little bit more violent because they were kind of defending themselves against that. And then, in turn, the military got more violent and started firing on them with bullets and bombs. And then all hell broke loose within a matter of weeks. The war is on. Since the Civil War began, there have been several different state entities that have emerged. The Syrian Opposition Force, that was the leadership, was immediately exiled to Turkey. Then there was the Federation of Northern Syria. Those were people that were a little bit more on the democratic side of things. They split off. Then there's the Islamic State and Iraq Levant. That is where you get ISIL. And those people split off into their faction. The Sunni Arab rebels, they were including the Free Syrian Army. They're the ones that took over Aleppo. And some of those people split off into their faction that wanted to be a little bit more militant. There was the Syrian Democratic Force. Most of them were Kurds and Turks. Those Syrian Arabs that I mentioned earlier, that group of people, they used to be the Syrian army, but they didn't like the way Assad was doing, so they kind of rebelled against him. And the Sunni Arab force, those are the ones that started off with the split. Some of them went moderate and some of them went a little bit more extreme, and those are the ones that became the ISIS and the al-Nusra, which a lot of people don't know that al-Nusra and al-Qaeda are the same thing. It's just that they're in separate countries, so they have to call themselves separate things. Because one of them, hey, you're getting too much of my press. You're going to have to rename yourself. So they became al-Nusra. And these are forces that we fund. But the funny thing is that we fund the other side too. We fund essentially every rebel group, and they're all fighting against each other. Not to mention the fact that we fund Saudi Arabia, and then they in turn fund the Kurds that come from Turkey down into Syria. So it's a quagmire, to say the least. 2014. Now, there is an incident in 2013, but I'm going to get to that in the next video. But bring us up to date. 2014, Assad is reelected. He only gets 88% of the vote, which is still ridiculously high considering the country's in the middle of a civil war. But, okay, Russia and Hezbollah, those are the groups that are, Hezbollah, they're the ones that are always fighting with Israel. But Russia and Hezbollah, they support the Syrian government, and along with some NATO countries, they launched strikes on ISIS. So that's when ISIS really started to take their foothold, and Russia and Hezbollah are fighting against them. Who knows who's funding what? I just know that there's a lot of weapons, and the Syrian people don't make weapons. They buy them from people like us and the Soviets. But every group, every one of these factions, they have some human rights violations against them. Every last one of them. So it's really hard to tell who the good guys are. It's one of those, we need to stay the hell out of it, let it settle, but we just got to be involved. So Assad's sworn in 2014, and it's another tightly controlled election. They didn't have any independent election monitors. So this guy, who was once seen as a reformer when he first takes office, has been asked to step down repeatedly since 2005. There was even an interview that Christine Amanpour, who is an international reporter, award-winning, she gets to interview Assad, and she asked him point blank in 2005, how do you feel about everybody asking you to step down because, he's just too extreme? And we have, it's not just us, but so many other factions have tried to get him out of power since basically he took office. And now we're up to date, and we have Donald Trump, and he says, look, I don't want to get involved, which is one of the very few things that I do agree with Donald Trump on. that he does not want to get involved. He wants them to run their own country. And he pledged not to mess with the interior government of Syria. And in the last year, Assad has taken back control much of his country. But within 4 days of that, everything has changed. And Donald Trump, who says he wants to stay out of it and let that country run itself, has now fired 59 Tomahawk missiles at the country. And even though that air base was up and running in 3 hours, and it was an offensive attack, and everybody is pissed off at Donald Trump, who knows what's going to happen with this. But if we take him out of power, I am guaranteeing you right now, that country is going to be the very next Iraq, and we're going to have 20 more years of that war. And won't that be lovely? Make sure that you check out the second video where I go through the 2013 and the 2017 chemical attacks. Hey, this is Antoinette from Transistor Rodeo. If you like what you saw here, please subscribe for more videos and content, and you can follow me on Twitter @Transistor Radio.